Good evening and welcome to the O&M Stockroom with your hosts Brian McGarry.
And Ken O'Malley.
And tonight is episode 11 of Complimentary Cinema. And spoiler alert, we talk about movies that you can watch for free on YouTube and we discuss them in length. So if there's anything that you don't want revealed about the particular movie we're going to cover, then maybe watch or listen to this podcast after you have seen the film.
We talk about everything in its entirety.
In its entirety. We leave no stone unturned unless we just happen to not think about it at the time.
Or unless it's too depressing to continue with.
Oh, definitely. So, we've had a really good trend going the last few weeks where we have actually been covering some really pretty interesting films and some actually fairly well acted ones as well. And I'm happy to say tonight we're gonna change the trend, and we're gonna go diving deeply back into garbage.
All good things have to come to an end, and this has come to an end in a exploding wreck.
Would you even say that this movie, The Wraith, is explosively bad?
It is explosively bad.
It is explosively bad. So like all, nearly all complimentary cinema films that we watch and review on this channel, we basically just kind of pick them at random. Does the title sound good? Does the poster art look halfway interesting? And well, The Wraith was kind of it caught my imagination. The title, it jumped out at me. I'm like, okay, Wraith is a cool word. All right, reminds me of like Lord of the Rings and supernatural stuff.
I watched you pick the movie. It took less than half a second.
You
just saw The Wraith, and that was it.
I was like, okay, that's it. Sometimes you just got a good feeling about things. And sometimes that feeling is absolutely dead wrong, as it was in the case of this film. So, so The Wraith, it sounds supernatural. It sounds maybe even spooky. There's not, I would not call this a spooky film by any stretch.
No, there's no spookiness.
There's no spooky here. So, 1986 film, directed and written by Mike Marvin, who has done other really fantastic films such as Hot Dog the movie and Hamburger the movie, and some other one that looked like almost like a softcore porn.
They all looked pretty terrible.
They all look pretty terrible. And this actually might have been the biggest budget and the closest to an A-list cast that any of his films came to. And it's just too bad that he had to write it also, because writing on this one was particularly horrendous.
It was very bad. It was very noticeable throughout the entirety. It's hard to say where to start exactly with all the flaws of this film.
Well, how about just a quick synopsis of the plot here?
So the movie is mostly about a guy who's a real jerk, and he's the head of a car gang who likes to race people to win their pink slip for their car. Really, and this is the problem with the movie. Even just in the synopsis, is the movie is mostly about him.
It really is. So, ostensibly, the film is supposed to star Charlie Sheen, and we get maybe, I'm just pulling this out of my ass. Maybe 10, 15 minutes of actual Charlie Sheen screen time, but we see the bad guy, played by Nick Cassavetes. He plays the gang leader, Packard Walsh. And yeah, we see him over and over and over and over again. It really is a vehicle for Nick Cassavetes.
So anyway, he races people for their cars, and he is a big jerk. He has a quote girlfriend who's really just like he forces to stay around with him, and is always just trying to leave him. And technically, the movie would be about her and this new guy that comes into town who is kind of a stranger nobody knows.
Charlie Sheen.
Yes, Charlie Sheen. So he comes in like riding a motorcycle. Nobody really knows him, but
The introductory shot of Charlie Sheen was pretty great. I mean, it was a full, like 30 seconds of him just on an Arizona highway, just kind of coming closer and closer, wearing no T-shirt.
mm-hmm.
You know, like a jean jacket thing, but no shirt, hair blown in the wind. This film is from 1986, and that's about as 80s as it gets. You know, riding in a Fisher Price colored dirt bike on a road with the sun on your face.
And throughout all of this, the opening parts of this movie, there's just 80s music blasting, and like a whole bunch of songs, just one after the next.
The soundtrack to this definitely got off to a great start. I mean, you've got Ozzy Osbourne, you have Robert Palmer. You know, there's a lot of well-known artists in the soundtrack for this. They spent probably a great deal of money on the rights for these songs. So I would assume. I mean, the budget for this film was, you said, what did you say it was? Like $3 million?
Yeah, just
like,
under.
In the ballpark of $3 million. We have quite a few explosions in the film, and you have licensing rights for all of the music there. Seems like that's where probably a lot of the budget went.
Now, we can also talk about where some of the budget probably came from, which is the Chrysler Corporation.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All the cars in this film are very obviously Chrysler branded. And in fact, well, I guess we should get to kind of what the Wraith is before we can really explain anything further. But basically, we're shown at the very beginning, before anything starts, these like kind of weird electric light pulses that are just kind of speeding through the desert,
zooming around,
and they converge in the middle of the nowhere in the desert to form the car.
The car,
which I don't know if that's the Wraith. I mean, the guy's the Wraith, but is the car technically part of that?
I think the car is definitely part of it. The car is its own character.
It's just a very aerodynamic looking black car.
Basically, it's one of the best scenes in the film. You have these like fantastical like pulses of energy. They converge at this crossroads, and then there's this big bright light, and then you get all of these amazingly 80s close-ups with like fog and dim lighting of this super sleek black car, which in profile looks a little bit like a Lamborghini.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, before you can see it very well.
Before you see it, I thought it was a Lamborghini at first, but unfortunately it was just a Dodge Chrysler, which is really not impressive at all.
Yeah.
Just not impressive.
So there's, and then you also see the driver is a guy in all black with a black racing helmet.
Yes.
And then like some weird, like armor looking stuff and like braces.
It's like if you combined Daft Punk and a Borg, you would get the look for this character.
It looked incredibly Daft Punk.
It was very Daft Punk and very, very sci-fi in that regard. I mean, it was almost like a biomechanical suit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's almost like a oh man, maybe not Daft Punk mixed with the Borg, but Daft Punk mixed with like a bodysuit from like one of the Alien movies.
Yeah.
Combine those, and then you have the look of this character.
Yeah, that's fair.
The driver of this mystery vehicle.
So anyway, the driver and car combined, I would say, is the Wraith, because a lot of the film is the car, and so you don't actually see the character as much. You see him a couple times, but it's mostly the car.
You really just see the car. Yeah, the car is it's definitely its own thing and its own character, and it kind of reminds me of another film from the 70s called The Car, which I may have mentioned before recently. And that's about another black car that goes driving around. Only that car also ostensibly has a supernatural origin as well. But that one is a little more malevolent than this one. But certainly a potential inspiration for this film.
So the really great part about this film is that they don't explain anything, and we spend most of our time with really terrible people.
Like you do. So, so we spend an awful lot of time with Packard's gang, among which is Clint Howard, Ron Howard's much less attractive but equally talented brother, just you know, just not much in the looks department, not necessarily an A-list actor, but certainly a very incredibly, I don't know. I mean,
Memorable?
He's a very memorable character actor.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's been in Apollo 13. He was on an episode of the original Star Trek. He's been in tons and tons and tons of stuff. And it was kind of delightful to see him in it because I'm like, oh, hey, at least he's going to give a good performance. Packard himself, I mentioned was played by Nick Cassavetes. His father, I can't remember his first name, but his father played the sketchy-ass husband in Rosemary's Baby. So he was a famous actor back in the 60s. And then you have Charlie Sheen, who was the less talented son of Martin Sheen, who's a goddamn brilliant actor. Not that Charlie Sheen's terrible, but he's not Martin Sheen. He's not his dad.
He's Charlie Sheen.
He's Charlie Sheen. And then what's another one? You got
Randy Quaid.
Randy Quaid. And then you have Randy Quaid, the less talented and less attractive brother of Dennis Quaid. It's like you get a I mean, what's a good way to put this?
It's like the second string.
You get all of the Hollywood dynastic leftovers. Somebody just kind of scooped them all up and just put them in this film, which in itself is makes that fun to watch. Especially with that scene with Clint Howard and Randy Quaid just together. It's like, wow, here are two men, trying to make a living, standing in the massive shadows of hugely successful and talented brothers. It's like you just had to feel for him for a moment. It's like they're just trying so hard to like carve out their own name and make their own mark. And it's just, I mean, how do you do that?
And like, I think you mentioned too, a lot of these characters too, I don't know if miscast is the right word, but like, it's really hard to take the bad guy seriously.
I couldn't take anyone seriously in this film.
Randy Quaid was a terrible cast for that part.
So
he was supposed to be the sheriff.
Sheriff Loomis, the guy who's trying to figure out why this Wraith is going around killing these gang members. And he tries to portray this very, confident, kind of swaggery, kind of, tough guy, but it's Randy Quaid.
Yeah, there's no swagger at all.
I mean, he's listen, if he was cast as a high school vice principal, I would have been like, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think you needed someone a little more grizzled for that part
yeah,
too.
Because
his face is kind of still youngish.
It's just baby soft and just kind of goofy, and it's it's kind of like when you see a kid kind of try on his parents' clothes, and play adult. It's like that's like what it's like trying to watch Randy Quaid play a serious, like macho kind of badass character.
Yeah.
Not that Sheriff Loomis is necessarily those things, but he's supposed to be like the town tough guy figure of authority, and you just never really,
and that like
you're never sold on it,
and that like all the other police kind of follow him instinctively. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like no one ever challenges him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he is the sheriff in the film, so I mean, I kind of get that, but at the same
I'm saying
time,
his character doesn't earn it.
His character does not earn that level of command and respect that he's given in this film, and also likewise, same thing for Packard Walsh. He's just not. This bad guy is.
Problem is that he's not menacing, really.
He's really not. I mean, the first time that we're introduced to Packard and his gang is the very first, I guess second scene in the film after the unrevealing of the Wraith. And, they kind of, they all like drive these really ugly ass cars that are, one's a Corvette and goes kind of fast and, yada. So, so they kind of surround this young couple in a Daytona. And they're like, hey, either race us for your car or we're going to like gang rape your woman. So the kid, races him and he loses the race through foul play. And then they take his car and basically leave this kid and this woman to go walk off. And the entire time, like, none of them are really menacing. Because Packard Walsh, he just looks goofy. Well, first off, I mean, he looks too old for the kind of character that he's playing. Like, he looks like he's like one step away from like playing like a Wall Street broker. But they've got him like in a bad fake leather vest with a really feathery mullet. And he just doesn't, they flash around a little switchblade, but whatever. And then all the rest of his goons are like these short little dorks. And yeah, like, they might look rough. Like one's like kind of a fake punk and, another looks like another, like, just typical tough guy. But none of them ever really, they just don't have it. They don't have that menacing aspect really. They never quite get there.
They're just really dumb, awkward, like hick people.
Basically. It's like, like I grew up in a small town in Oregon, which had a lot of what we called Walmart gangsters. People who acted like they were from the streets, but they were really from like the trailer park. And they got their Nike and Adidas at Walmart and they thought they were badass. It's kind of like that. That's what you have in this film. But for a car gang, I mean, what kind of, they never really make it clear exactly what kind of gang they are.
I mean, they just fix up cars and they race people to get their cars.
Yeah, they listen to Billy Idol and they have like a really pretty sweet shop there.
Yeah.
They work on their cars like in this giant, not quite a barn. I mean, it's just a big auto shop that kind of shaped like a barn. But I mean, it's got like neon lights inside and they're listening to like the latest hits and
they don't explain like where he's getting financing.
I mean, yeah, stuff. I mean, like these are well-financed hoodlums with a lot of equipment, Now,
I guess you could say some of the parts and stuff they might get from the airplane junkyard or something, but
a couple of the hoodlums do work in a junk plane.
So they might be like scrapping parts from there to sell or something, but they don't explain it.
Yeah, they don't explain that at all.
There's so little that is explained in this film that they have flashback exposition in the middle of like a whole different scene without having explained anything about what's going on.
Okay, and a great example of that early in the film, so Charlie Sheen, he's the first time we see him, he's just driving into town on his little dirt bike. I mean, it's a ridiculous looking bike too. I mean, that immediately just kind of makes you like you can't take him seriously. Crappy little bike. And he goes, and next time we see him, like, he's down at like a little river area and he's checking out Sherilyn Fenn's character, Carrie Johnson. And she's, the alleged girlfriend of Packard. And Packard's immediately like checking him, looking at his so-called girl. And that's when he has the first flashback to him murdering a guy.
Yeah,
with his buddies.
They're literally sitting on the side of a river. It's a sunny day. There's a bunch of people in swimsuits and like having a good time. And then we have a flashback to him murdering someone.
Yes. Just boom.
Just out of nowhere.
He just looks at Charlie Sheen and he just imagines murder. Incredible.
If we had to like pause it for a moment and be like, what?
We had to pause it and go back and just look at that again and just be like, okay, so that happened in that sequence and that's what we're doing. Okay.
So we have a couple flashbacks like that in this movie that are flashing back to the same murder from different people's perspectives. Yeah. And that ends up being like part of the storytelling, but it is just very strange because it doesn't seem to be explaining anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's
supposed to be hints. It's supposed to be hints throughout the movie.
They're giving clues as to Charlie Sheen's real origin and his real identity.
Yeah.
Which you can pick up on if you're paying attention. But, I'll give it this. Those scenes are good in the, I'm a big fan of the show me, don't tell me aspect of, acting and theater and film. They're showing you that, Packard and his crew are a bunch of murderous assholes. Which is a lot more convincing than everyone just being like, ooh, they're kind of creepy and weird. which, there's some talk. It's nice to actually just see what they're capable of. But the way that they did it is what I have the problem with.
And the problem of, okay, we introduced them as these bike gang jerks or whatever. And then it wasn't until later then like, oh, well, they killed somebody. Like, isn't that kind of backwards?
A little bit,
Shouldn't they have shown the gravity of how violent they could be first?
I mean, they kind of do in that opening scene with that young couple in the Daytona.
Yeah, but they don't really do anything.
But they don't. Yeah, they don't. They let him go, and they act. They kind of posture all tough. But even like the kid driving the Daytona is like, yeah, whatever. You fucking assholes, whatever. Take my fucking car.
I guess my point is that the writing is a mess.
The writing is a mess, and
the things that are explained and aren't explained is problematic.
We might need to just start making lists while we're watching these things, because man, there was a lot of them. They don't explain that. They don't. Okay, so I'm gonna jumping ahead here. So these guys like to race. All right. Well, the magic car that we see at the beginning, which came out of the lightning bolts, they're gonna race that car too. And well, they end up racing that car a few times, the Wraith car, and the car always ends up magically being somewhere right where one of Packard's gang's cars are, and there's an explosion, they crash, Packard's gang member's dead, the Wraith car rematerializes and poofs off again. And every time that happens, there's like some like metal brace or device or something that like vanishes or disappears, either out of the wreckage or even on the Wraith driver himself. That is never talked about. That's never explained. That's never addressed in the actual film. The other big thing that's not addressed, the eyes. Tell us about that.
So yeah, every time, because the first time that you kind of mentioned there that the Wraith guy races against someone, the other driver from the gang ends up dying in a horrible fiery crash. But when the police come to pick up the body, it's completely unharmed in any way except its eyes are missing.
The eyes are missing. Like gone.
But even though it was like a fiery, violent crash, the rest of the body is completely fine. None of this is explained.
Ever. They point it out more than once, because they point it out every time another person dies. Well, nearly every time somebody dies in this film. But they never come back to that. It's just left as, this creepy thing that happened, and they never, there's no follow through. And there's no follow up. It's
not like you can even come to your own conclusion, because it's just a weird thing that happens. And there is no meaning or significance to it.
Yeah, cause, I mean, there's nothing that so like the eyes disappearing, there's nothing else in the film to tie that to, except like the vanishing of the metal brace things. But there's no direct correlation shown between those.
See, like if the bodies had shown up after the accidents with like one of the stab wounds on them, or like, something like that, that would make sense. If like they were all stabbed in the same place or something like that.
Yeah.
That would have made sense.
That would have made sense, but yeah, this is not a film that makes a lot of sense. So let's go back to Carrie Johnson, Sherilyn Fenn's character. So Sherilyn Fenn from Twin Peaks, awesome actress, been in a lot of good stuff. Definitely one of the high points of this film, just overall. Both for actually being able to act, but also being impeccably lovely, especially at this point in her career. So she was the girlfriend of a Jamie Hankins, who was murdered, and that's the flashback scene that we keep seeing. And it's shown that it's Packard's gang that killed Jamie Hankins, and now she's kind of owned or possessed by Packard and his gang. And just within like 30, not even 30 seconds, 10 seconds of meeting Charlie Sheen, she immediately hops on his bike to go for a ride somewhere. Just like, oh, hey, yeah, okay. That's kind of odd.
Yeah.
Can you imagine in any, put yourself in her place, or even you're a young single guy and a hot chick on a motorcycle shows up. Okay, well, maybe I would. Okay, so maybe if I would, okay, all right.
Well, anyway, the point is, there's no reason for her to be all about this guy
at all
at the drop of a hat, other than the fact that she's quote dating a guy who's a complete jerk and she wants to get away from him.
Yeah, which I get, but it just doesn't seem like but that also underscores how Packard is not really scary or intimidating. The minute somebody else comes along, but hey, you want to ride? She's like, hey, okay. Ooh, you're kind of cute, kind of vibes.
Well, he's just kind of pathetic.
He is pathetic. And this is something else that you mentioned while we were watching this. And what was that, Ken?
What? Everyone's pathetic?
Everyone in this movie is pathetic. You have a pathetic sheriff. You have a pathetic antagonist. The protagonist, Charlie Sheen as the protagonist, is not impressive at all. Because they gave him so little to work with, for one thing.
The brother.
The brother.
The burger flipper.
The brother of the murdered Jamie Hankins, Billy Hankins. He has this great scene where he confronts Packard in the burger joint parking lot when he's taking Sherilyn Fenn's character away, and he tries to stop him, and it's like he just stands there and let his ass get fucking kicked. He does absolutely nothing to stop it. He doesn't even try to hit the guy. Just pathetic.
And nobody comes to help him at all.
Nobody comes to help him.
20 people standing around watching
Just watching him get his ass kicked. Just watching this woman get, taken away clearly against her will, And he comes up and he calls them all chicken shit bastards or whatever. And he's absolutely right. Every single person in this film is a chicken shit bastard of some kind, except for, Charlie Sheen and Loomis,
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they're just, the amount of spines in this film is pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
There's maybe 3, maybe 4 tops.
Maybe. They're still not that strong though.
There might be missing a few vertebrae, but there's something there at least. But man, so
I mean, even Sheriff Loomis, I guess his point in this movie is to be the investigator. But even that is he doesn't ever figure anything out either.
He really doesn't. He
figures out is that this ghost car is weird shit. That's it.
That literally is it. And then, even at the end of the film, he's just it's over. We're done. He's just we're not going to keep up after this. All the because by the end, all the bad guys are dead.
Ultimately, it's a revenge movie.
And Loomis just kind of gives up and he just calls it a day. It's they're all dead. It's over now. What the fuck, man? That's it? That's you being a sheriff? And at the very beginning of the film, we see a re-election sign. This man is up for re-election, and he's just going to let this vigilante murderer just, grease 6 people?
Well, apparently there's no one else in town that can do anything worth a damn.
I mean, because, Loomis, all he really does is basically just kind of walk up to the, I wish they had a name for this gang so I could refer to them. The Packard gang. And all he does is just insult them with bad insults.
And he tries to catch them in the act.
He doesn't catch him doing shit.
Yeah.
He's always a day late and a dollar short.
I'll get you. I got a warrant.
It's like a Wile E. Coyote chasing the road runner. It's just he's always a day late and a dollar short. He's got nothing.
Completely ineffective.
And when he does show up at Packard's with a warrant, he doesn't even have other cops with him. He just catches the guy in bed with another woman and just kind of stands there, just kind of being an ass. And then Packard's an ass. And then the poor woman's just I just wanted to get some.
So I mentioned in the middle of this movie at some point when I realized that this was just going to be the rest of our life for this movie, is that we're spending this movie with all the wrong people. Because you don't have any character that we're rooting for.
You really don't. I mean, you're supposed to be rooting for Charlie Sheen.
You know who the good guys are. You have the guy, and the girl he's after.
Yeah, I mean,
and the burger flipper guy.
sure, you know,
They're all the good guys.
Yeah, they're the good guys. I mean, you know who you're supposed to be rooting for.
But we spend so little time with them, and their characters are so, like, they have no endearing
They're incredibly two-dimensional.
interactions.
They're incredibly two-dimensional. It's you never ever start to really give a shit about them because you never really get to know Sherilyn Fenn's character. She's just like
I mean, she's likable as an actress, and
Yeah.
like the character she's playing. She's not unlikable.
she's not unlikable, but at the same time, you never really. I mean,
she's-
beyond empathizing with her situation, you never really get to know her.
Like,
There's
she's
nothing to know about her.
She's the cute waitress who's getting abused by her boyfriend.
Yeah. You never get past her situation. You
Right.
never get to know her as a character. And you never really, I mean,
It's the same for all of them. Then.
it's the same for most of them, really. Yeah.
The brother working at the burger place, he's just like the kind of nice guy who you know who's just
Ineffectual and weak.
just kind of weak. He just keeps to himself and tries to stay out of the light. And you know he's an alright guy, but that's it. And then Charlie Sheen's character is just like I'm the new guy. Like I'm new in town.
I'm the new guy.
That's
That's
his
it.
character.
That's his whole character is I'm the new guy. And the most that either Billy or Charlie Sheen's character ever get is just when they first meet at that river and they're just kind of hanging out on the sand and they talk for a few minutes. When you have the first flashback murder scene, and that's really the most development you get for either one of them, specifically Charlie Sheen. You get a little more with Billy, but not much.
So really all the interactions between the people is treated as let's just get to the cars racing.
Oh, and how many car races are in this film, Ken?
Well, there's 5.
So there's the first one in the very beginning of the film, right?
Right.
With the Daytona, which we completely forgot about until we went on IMDb to look at some of the cast.
Yeah.
It was like the Daytona driver. Oh, that's how irrelevant that scene was.
And
ultimately,
even at some point in a little bit into the movie, I'm like, oh, we're never going to see these people again. Like, those aren't characters. There was a whole scene at the beginning with these 2 characters, and then we just never see them again.
they just didn't matter at all.
It was just to introduce the bad gang, have a car race, and establish that they're scumbags who just want to take your car.
Yeah. So that's the first race, right? And then there's the. God, what was the second race? Was the second race with the Wraith car?
Yeah.
And then there was like a third race with the Wraith car. And then there was there's at least 4.
No, there was 2 with the Wraith car.
Okay.
There's one where one of the bad guys are chasing him on the motorcycle.
Okay, that counts too.
And then there's another chase with the Wraith car.
So and then there's the one at the end too. So there's like 6 or 7 races in this film. They get the race quotient perfect.
And a lot of it, I mean, it's for a car chase, it's decent. I mean, they have nice scenery. It's supposed to be in Arizona, so there's a lot of the the rock formations in the background, the kind of cliffs. They're going around these windy, one lane in each direction roads with no shoulders or anything. A great scenery for a race scene.
The setting for the film is absolutely gorgeous. It's definitely like rural Arizona too. So you get a lot of fantastic nature shots and establishing shots.
And there's one stretch of road they shoot a lot where it's got like these little bunny hills. So like you can see the cars going up and down.
And that's always fun.
And
That's always fun.
it's effective.
Yeah.
They use it a lot because it's just a great shot, and it's a straight section of road with these up and down hills, and it's great for these chases. But the problem is there's no substance. And after the first chase with the Wraith guy, you know what's going to happen every other time.
You really do, because like the first race sets a pattern that you just kind of know is going to repeat itself, and boy, does it. It's like, like even when the second guy's like, yeah, I'm going to race him. I'm going to get revenge for Ogie. Yes, Ogie, the name of the first guy who died racing the Wraith. There was other great character names like what? Gutter Boy and Skank.
Yep.
So fantastic names for some of these characters. So Minty, I believe, was the name of
Yep.
the
Minty.
jockish member of the Packard gang. You barely see or hear of him at all. Then all of a sudden he's in this car, and every time they race, they wear a helmet, which I find hilarious because they're driving recklessly in these cars all through this movie, but it's only when they decide to race another vehicle that they bust out the helmet, which I thought was a very interesting touch, to say the least. So anyway, as soon as Minty gets in the car, it's like, oh, I'm gonna get revenge on this guy. I'm just like, oh, there's the next red shirt. There's the next guy who's like, I'm gonna be the next disposable character to get absolutely greased in this film.
And so they did.
And so he did, yeah. And so what else can you say about this film?
I think we really said everything.
That really is. I mean, this is basically a race car film, but not with actual race cars, with a vague supernatural element that's never explained or addressed.
The writing is terrible. You spend all of your time with people who you dislike, unlikable characters, or just scummy people.
Yeah, and then and let's talk about the writing again for a minute. The one-liners in this film are constant. I wish I had written some of them down because a couple were so awful that they really should have been shared here.
They were just bad.
They were just. And here's the other thing. It's not like the dialogue was peppered with them. Like if you took, like let's say you're at Olive Garden, and you want a little bit of Parmesan on your pasta. All right. So good little slang or like phrases, in good writing, there'd be a sprinkle of Parmesan. Somebody took the entire can and just dumped it on the plate, so to speak. Because you'd have like one right after the other, right after the other, right after the other. Which was very distracting in a sense, because it really pulls you out of the film. Because you're laughing at just how bad that writing is. And another thing too. So ultimately this film is about Charlie Sheen being resurrected. He was the guy that ended up being murdered. And that guy was with Sherilyn Fenn. So Sherilyn Fenn's boyfriend was a different version of the Charlie Sheen character. And he's come back to get his revenge on this gang. And where the hell was I going? Oh, yeah. So anyway, there's another film that I can think of where a couple is intruded upon by a gang of violent people that also have a member in their gang named Skank. And that movie also has another person come back from the dead to get revenge on those who wronged him. And that movie is called The Crow, which a film you have not seen, but is a fantastic film and a much better version than this, of that basic template of coming back from the dead because of true love and that kind of thing. And one other nice little, well, not nice, but one other interesting little tidbit. So in The Crow, Brandon Lee died during the filming of that. And in this film, a production member died when a car turned over. So there is definitely a couple of parallels there. It makes me wonder what the source material for The Crow is and what inspired this particular film. Supposedly it was David Lynch, according to what I read, but I have a hard time seeing that.
I think someone had the idea of what if we had a bunch of cars to race, and how do we get to that point? It's a guy that's dead, and it's a ghost car.
And you can crash him over and over again. That's definitely is what that felt like.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we always cover certain categories in these. We talk about the relevant background info, the plot summary. We always discuss the soundtrack a little bit. We also like to talk about the most extraneous or useless character. And how many of those are in this film, Ken?
Well, a whole gang full.
There's a whole gang full of them.
No, I don't know. I guess the brother?
The brother actually serves. Oh God, does he serve any purpose? I was gonna say no. Wait a minute.
Okay, how about the uncle? The uncle in the airplane yard.
Oh God. Okay, so at one point, Sheriff Loomis is going around. He wants to talk to a couple of members of the Packard gang, and one of them is a nephew of this guy who runs a scrap aerospace junkyard. And you see him for like 25 seconds. That is definitely the most extraneous, useless character.
And this is one of those classic filmmaking things. They were filming in Arizona. They were on location. There happened to be an airplane junkyard nearby. And they're like, why don't we have it come up with the reason to film over there? And that's how that happened.
That's exactly how that happened. They just saw something that was visually interesting that could make it look like the budget was bigger than it was, that the movie was a bigger scope than it was. And they're like, how do we like ham fist our way into this and get this into the film?
We'll just have the sheriff interrogate some people here.
Yeah, and then just have this completely useless scene with this, uncle, uncle.
Yeah.
And that was, oh God. And definitely the couple in the beginning, completely useless, completely extraneous.
Like they had a purpose, but that scene didn't have a purpose.
You could have cut out the entire scene, that entire first scene of that first race.
Yeah.
It never needed to happen.
Well, they needed to have the main bad guy race first, and it couldn't be a race where he died. So that's why they had to be, But what it should have been is it should have been racing a character that was actually in the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
That came back later for some reason.
Something. It should have, it could have been Billy.
Yeah.
They tried to get him to race at one point, before the Wraith car shows up to interrupt him.
It could have been the first race would have been like, oh, I know you had something to do with my brother. And so he races him to try to,
Yeah.
He can't get revenge, so his brother has to come back from the dead to get revenge for him.
You just wrote a better movie, Ken. That's amazing.
I sure did, Brian. I'll be expecting my check in the mail anytime.
Here's the thing. That actually would have made sense. That would have been a more compelling story, and you would have had two less idiots in the film. That just didn't even need to be in there. That was a complete throwaway scene.
The problem with this movie is that you can't fix it. It's not worth fixing.
It really isn't. It isn't. And it's not worth watching either, if you haven't figured that out yet. This has a 6 out of 10 on IMDb. I'd give it a 4.
I got to say, that 6 has got to be just from people who like the car chases.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad, campy film. But it's not bad enough, and it's not campy enough.
It's overwhelmingly pathetic.
It's just pathetic.
The characters are pathetic. The story is pathetic. The amount of exposition is pathetic.
And the way it's introduced, like we said, the
amount of time we spend with people who are pathetic is pathetic.
When Charlie Sheen is top billed in this film, you expect to see Charlie Sheen in this film. So for those of you who've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you know that there's a Charlie Sheen scene in that as well. Okay? We see him maybe 3 times that amount in this film that he gets top billing in.
Yeah.
Released the same year, I might add.
See, they really need to use him in a way where he is antagonizing the bad people. Like, with his charisma and, charm and whatever.
Sure.
They need to play that up.
Sure, yeah. But here's the thing. So the only time you ostensibly see him is in the car. Okay, so the car. Or you see him in his Daft Punk Borg outfit, which, could be anybody. Could be the director's brother, nephew, whatever. Wife. I mean, who knows? The actual screen time with him, just as Charlie Sheen, is so minimal. And it's amazing.
And it's all him with, what's her name?
Carrie Johnson.
Carrie Johnson.
Yeah.
It's all the scenes with her.
Yeah, just about. Except because even the one where he's talking to Billy, his brother.
They don't really talk about much.
Yeah, they don't talk about much, and they're looking at Sherilyn Fenn's character the whole time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he has nothing on his own to build. It's just the more you talk about it, it's like the worse it gets.
Yeah.
It's like there's absolutely nothing of him on his own.
It's a spiral. It really is.
It's just the more you It's like a shit onion. You just take another layer and it's worse.
It's like the further you get in the discussion, the further you go down the drain.
Further down the drain here on the O&M Stockroom.
So I would say the only other thing that's okay, the car chases are fine.
Those are well executed, well filmed.
The soundtrack is fine.
The soundtrack is great.
So I think both of those things were good especially for this era.
Sure.
Those are the highlights, and it's not worth watching for those things.
It's definitely not, and it's not, there is some light nudity, which some younger members of the audience may appreciate. Specifically the 14-year-old, middle school boy may find the brief glimpses something of note, but you shouldn't watch it if you're under, say, 17 or so without parental guidance. Or whatever.
Uncle Brian is looking out for you, innocent people.
I'm a podcaster, not a cop. Do what you like. But there's just every time you think it's going to be something interesting, it doesn't materialize.
I realized pretty quickly that I was resigned to my fate, that I was not going to enjoy this movie.
I held on to hope for a full 30 minutes that it was going to turn around and kind of coalesce, but I knew it wouldn't because I'd never heard of it. And if I had not heard of it, considering all the other people that were in it, including Randy Quaid, including Clint Howard, I just that was the foreboding there. I just knew it wasn't gonna happen, and it didn't.
Nope. Any
other final thoughts or comments on this film, Ken?
Just don't bother.
Yeah, don't bother. Don't bother. You can listen to this and just skip that.
Which, if you got to this point, you already did, hopefully.
Hopefully. All right. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Complimentary Cinema on O&M Stockroom. We're your hosts, Brian McGarry.
And Ken O'Malley.
And we will see you next week.